The morning sky over New Geneva burned red with the fires of dying ships. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the command deck of the Orbital Defense Station, watching another wave of human vessels get torn apart by alien weapons. The Zephyrian ships moved like silver daggers through space, cutting down everything in their path. "Sir, we've lost the carrier group near Sector 7, reported Commander Rick Barnes, his voice tight with stress. "Captain Rodriguez is requesting permission to fall back to the moon base." Jake nodded grimly. Lisa Rodriguez was one of their best pilots, but even she couldn't work miracles. The human fleet was down to less than 30 ships from the original 200. Every day brought fresh reports of cities burning, colonies going silent, and brave men and women dying for a cause that seemed hopeless. "Tell Rodriguez to retreat. We need every ship we can save," Jake said. He turned to look at the massive holographic display showing Earth below. Most of the planet's surface was dark now. The Zephyrians had been thorough in their destruction. Only a few cities remained, protected by energy shields that grew weaker with each passing hour. The aliens had come from the edge of the galaxy 3 years ago. Nobody knew exactly why they attacked. Some said humans had accidentally crossed into their territory. Others believed the Zephyrians simply enjoyed conquest. Whatever their reasons, they had proven themselves to be efficient killers. The Zephyrian collective controlled half the known galaxy. They had destroyed dozens of civilizations before turning their attention to Earth. Their technology was far ahead of humanity's. Their ships could cross vast distances in days, while human vessels took months. Their weapons could punch through any armor humans had developed. Jake had spent his entire career preparing for war, but never anything like this. The enemy seemed to have unlimited resources. For every ship they destroyed, 10 more appeared. For every battle humans won, they lost 3 others. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Dr. Clark," Barnes said. "He says it's urgent." Jake felt a small spark of hope. Nathan Clark had been working on something in the underground research facility beneath New Geneva. The scientist had been very secretive about his project, but he had promised it would change everything. Jake desperately hoped the man had finally made a breakthrough. "Put him through," Jake ordered. Dr. Clark's tired face appeared on the communication screen. The man looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His gray hair was messy, and his lab coat was stained with coffee and chemicals. "Admiral, I need to speak with you privately," Clark said. "It's about the Phoenix Protocol." Jake had heard that name whispered in the hallways of the research facility, but nobody would tell him what it meant. Even President Helen Carter seemed nervous whenever the subject came up. "Can it wait? We're in the middle of a battle here," Jake said. "No, it can't wait. The Zephyrians are preparing for their final assault. Our sensors show they're moving their entire fleet into position. They plan to destroy what's left of Earth within the next 48 hours. Jake felt his stomach drop. He had known this moment would come, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Earth was about to die. "What's the Phoenix Protocol?" he asked, quietly. Clark glanced around nervously before leaning closer to his camera. "I can't explain everything over an open channel, but Admiral, we're not as helpless as we appear. Humanity has been preparing for this moment longer than anyone realizes." Before Jake could ask more questions, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. The tactical display lit up with hundreds of red dots. The Zephyrian fleet was moving! "Admiral, they're coming in fast!" Barnes shouted over the noise. "Estimated time to Earth orbit is 6 hours. Jake looked back at Clark's image on the screen. The scientist's expression was grim, but determined. Doctor. Whatever you're planning now would be a good time, Jake said. I need 12 more hours to complete the preparations, Clark replied. Can you buy me that much time? Jake almost laughed. 12 hours against the entire Zephyrian fleet with less than 30 ships? It was impossible. But then he looked at his crew. These men and women had followed him through 3 years of hell. They deserved better than surrender. We'll give you every minute we can, Jake promised. The next few hours passed in a blur of desperate fighting. Captain Rodriguez led her remaining ships in hit-and-run attacks against the advancing enemy. The human pilots fought with the fury of people who had nothing left to lose. They knew this was Earth's last stand. Jake coordinated the defense from his command post, moving ships like pieces on a chessboard. Every decision meant life or death for hundreds of people. Every mistake cost them vessels they couldn't afford to lose. As the battle raged above, reports came in from the surface. The Zephyrians were landing troops in the remaining cities. Fighting had broken out in New York, London, and Tokyo. Civilian shelters were being overrun. Children were dying. Sir, message coming in from President Carter, Barnes said during a brief lull in the fighting. Helen Carter's face appeared on screen. The president looked older than her 50 years. The weight of leading humanity through its darkest hour had taken its toll. Admiral, Dr. Clark tells me you're aware of the Phoenix Protocol, she said. Only that it exists, Madam President. He won't give me details. Carter nodded slowly. That's for your own protection. Jake, I need you to prepare for something that's going to sound impossible. In a few hours, we're going to broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. It's not going to be a surrender. Jake frowned. What kind of message? A warning, Carter said. We're going to give the Zephyrians one last chance to leave Earth alone. When they refuse, as we know they will, humanity is going to show the galaxy what we're really capable of. The transmission ended, leaving Jake more confused than ever. What could humanity possibly do that they hadn't already tried? Their technology was inferior. Their numbers were smaller. Their position was hopeless. But something in the president's voice had given him hope. There was a confidence there that he hadn't heard in months. Whatever the Phoenix Protocol was, Carter believed it would work. Jake turned back to the tactical display. The Zephyrian fleet was almost in position. Soon, the final battle for Earth would begin. Humanity would either find a way to survive, or they would make their last stand worthy of legend. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn something new about the human species. The underground bunker beneath New Geneva hummed with activity. President Helen Carter stood before a massive communication array that could broadcast across the entire galaxy. Her hands shook slightly as she prepared to deliver what might be humanity's final words to the universe. Dr. Nathan Clark worked frantically at a nearby console, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. Strange energy readings flickered across his screens, patterns that seemed to defy known physics. Amy Foster, his lead physicist, checked and rechecked calculations that would have been impossible just years ago. Madam President, the Galactic Communication Network is ready, announced Steve Hughes from his engineering station. Every civilized world in the galaxy will receive this transmission. Carter nodded and smoothed down her dark blue suit. She had chosen to wear Earth's colors for this moment. If this was to be humanity's epitaph, she wanted the galaxy to remember what they had destroyed. Above ground, the final battle raged. Captain Lisa Rodriguez had brought her remaining ships back to Earth's orbit for the last defense. Her fighter, squadron weaved between massive Zephyrian cruisers, their small weapons barely scratching the alien hulls. But they kept fighting, buying precious time for whatever Carter was planning. "Admiral Morrison, we're ready to begin the broadcast," Carter said into her communicator. Jake's voice crackled back through the static of battle. "Copy that, Madam President. The Zephyrians are demanding our surrender. Their commander wants to speak with you directly. Patch him through first. I want him to hear this too." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Zephyrian command ship. The alien commander was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. His species had evolved on a cold world far from any star, and they looked like living ice sculptures. "I am War Commander Thex of the Zephyrian Collective," the alien said in perfect English. "Your resistance ends now. Surrender your planet and we will make your deaths quick." Carter stepped forward, her chin raised in defiance. "I am President Helen Carter of Earth. I have a message for you and the entire galaxy." The alien's head tilted slightly. "Speak quickly, human. My patience grows thin." Carter looked directly into the camera that would carry her words to billions of beings across the galaxy. She thought of her own children, safe in a shelter deep beneath the city. She thought of all the human children who had already died in this war. Then she began to speak. "This is Earth's final message to the galaxy. We are humanity. 3 years ago, you came to our world without warning. You attacked our cities and killed our people. You showed no mercy to our children, no respect for our civilization. The galaxy watched as we burned and did nothing." The Zephyrian commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your species is weak. You deserve extinction." Carter ignored him and continued. "We tried to fight you with ships and weapons. We tried to match your technology. But that was never humanity's true strength. You have made one terrible mistake, Zephyrians. You have given us a reason to stop pretending." Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the transmission. In the crystal cities of the Corvin Republic, elegant aliens paused their daily routines to listen. On the trading stations of the Stellar Confederacy, merchants stopped their bargaining. Even the ancient elders of the core worlds turned their attention to this small blue planet on the galaxy's edge. "This is our final warning to you and every species watching," Carter said, her voice growing stronger. "Withdraw from Earth immediately. Leave our system and never return. This is not a negotiation. This is not a plea for mercy. This is your only chance." The Zephyrian commander's eyes narrowed. "Or what, human? You have no fleet. Your cities burn. Your people die. What threat could you possibly make?" Carter smiled, and for the first time in months, it was genuine. "If you do not leave Earth within the next hour, humanity will show the galaxy what we are truly capable of. We will demonstrate why our species should never have been threatened. And when we are finished, the name Zephyrian will be nothing but a memory." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the void of space. Then the alien commander began to laugh, a sound like breaking glass. "Impossible. Your technology is primitive. Your weapons are useless against us. You have nothing left to threaten us with." "Commander Thex," Carter said quietly, "you are about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon was never our technology. It was our ability to become something more than what we were. You attacked the wrong species." She gestured to Dr. Clark, who pressed a series of controls on his console. Strange energy readings spiked across every sensor on Earth and in orbit. The very air seemed to hum with power. "You see, Commander, while you were destroying our cities, we were unlocking secrets that your species could never understand. We discovered something about ourselves, something we kept hidden from the galaxy. Every human who has died in your war is not truly gone. We stored them, preserved their consciousness in ways your science cannot comprehend. The Zephyrians' expression began to change from amusement to concern. And now, Carter continued, they are very, very angry. Across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate. In the Corvan Senate, representatives began shouting questions. The Stellar Confederacy's Emergency Council was called into session. Even species that had fought the Zephyrians and lost began to pay attention to this strange transmission from a dying world. War Commander Thex leaned forward in his command chair. "You are bluffing, human. If you possess such power, you would have used it already." "We tried peace first," Carter replied. "We hoped the galaxy would accept us as equals. We were wrong. You forced us to reveal what we really are. In 60 minutes, Commander, you will understand why that was a mistake." She looked directly into the camera one final time. "To every civilization watching this transmission, remember what you see next. Remember that you had the chance to help Earth, and you chose to watch us burn instead. What happens to the Zephyrians is only the beginning. Humanity is no longer hiding." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. In the depths of space, the Zephyrian fleet prepared for their final assault on Earth. They had weapons that could crack planets and ships that could travel between stars. They believed themselves invincible. But in the quantum laboratories beneath New Geneva, Dr. Clark's fingers hovered over the activation key for the Phoenix Protocol. President Carter stood beside him, her decision made. In orbit above, Admiral Morrison watched the enemy fleet approach and wondered what miracle his leaders had prepared. The hour of humanity's transformation was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same again. 5 years earlier, before the Zephyrians had ever heard of Earth, Dr. Nathan Clark made a discovery that would change everything. He was working late in his laboratory at the Global Physics Institute, studying dark energy patterns in deep space, when his instruments detected something impossible. The readings showed that humans, alone among all known species, possessed a unique quantum signature. While other life forms were bound by normal physical laws, human consciousness seemed to resonate with the dark energy that filled the universe. At first, Clark thought his equipment was malfunctioning. "Amy, come look at this," he had called to his colleague, Dr. Amy Foster. She was the best quantum physicist on Earth, and if anyone could explain these strange readings, it would be her. Amy studied the data for hours, running test after test. Finally, she looked up at Clark with wide eyes. "Nathan, this is incredible. According to these readings, human consciousness isn't just electrical patterns in the brain. There's a quantum component that connects directly to dark energy fields." Clark nodded grimly. "That's what I was afraid you'd say. Do you understand what this means?" "It means humans might be able to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe," Amy whispered. "Dark energy makes up 68% of everything that exists. If we could learn to control it." They worked in secret for months, carefully studying the phenomenon. They discovered that the quantum signature grew stronger when humans experienced intense emotions, especially anger and determination. It was as if the universe itself responded to human willpower. Captain Steve Hughes joined their team when they needed an engineer who could build the special equipment required for their experiments. Steve was a military man, practical and direct. He didn't fully understand the science, but he grasped the implications immediately. "You're telling me that humans are basically living weapons?" he asked during one late-night briefing. "More than that," Clark replied. We're potentially the most powerful force in the galaxy, but only if we can learn to harness this ability. The breakthrough came when they tested the quantum resonance on recently deceased tissue. They found that human consciousness could be preserved in dark energy patterns, existing independently of the physical body. The implications were staggering. "We could bring back the dead," Amy said, her voice trembling. "Not as zombies or ghosts, but as beings of pure energy. Beings with the power to manipulate reality itself," Steve added. Clark made the decision to contact President Carter directly. The discovery was too important and too dangerous to remain in academic hands. If humanity was going to survive in a hostile galaxy, they needed to understand their true capabilities. Carter had assembled a secret council to oversee what they called the Phoenix Protocol. The project had 2 phases. First, map and store the consciousness patterns of as many humans as possible. Second, develop the technology to resurrect them as dark energy entities when needed. The timing had been perfect in the worst possible way. Just as they completed the theoretical framework, the first reports arrived of alien ships at the edge of the solar system. The Zephyrians had found Earth. "How long do we have?" Carter had asked during an emergency meeting. "Based on their approach vector, maybe 3 years before they reach Earth," Admiral Morrison replied. "Their technology is clearly superior to ours." "Then we have 3 years to prepare," Clark said. "We need to accelerate the Phoenix Protocol. Every human who dies in the coming war needs to be quantum mapped before their consciousness fades." The project became humanity's deepest secret. While the military prepared conventional defenses, Clark's team worked frantically to build quantum storage facilities across the planet. They disguised the installations as medical research centers and emergency hospitals. Amy developed the consciousness mapping technology, devices that could scan and preserve a human's complete mental pattern in the seconds after death. Steve engineered the quantum storage matrices that could hold thousands of consciousness patterns in crystalline structures no larger than a computer chip. As the war began, they put their system to the test. Every soldier, every civilian, every child who died in the Zephyrian attacks had their consciousness preserved. The quantum storage facilities filled with the minds of the dead, waiting for resurrection. The hardest part was keeping the secret. Families mourned their dead without knowing that their loved ones were not truly gone. The surviving population fought desperately while their leaders planned for something beyond their understanding. Colonel Danny Martinez had been one of the first to die in the defense of Luna Base. His quantum pattern was stored in Facility 7, along with thousands of other soldiers. Lieutenant Kelly Thompson, shot down over Mars, rested in Facility 3. General Tony Blake, killed defending the orbital stations, waited in Facility 1 beneath New Geneva. "How many do we have?" Carter asked during one of their final briefings, before the Phoenix Protocol activation. Clark checked his displays. 2,400,000 consciousness patterns. Everyone who died in the war, plus volunteers who were mapped before they entered combat. "And they'll retain their memories, their personalities?" "Everything that made them human," Amy confirmed, "but with capabilities far beyond anything they had in life. Dark energy entities can manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level. They can travel faster than light, survive in the vacuum of space, and reshape reality through pure will." Steve looked up from his engineering console. "The power requirements for full activation are enormous. We'll need to tap directly into Earth's core energy." "Do it," Carter ordered. "Whatever the cost." Clark had spent sleepless nights wondering if they were making the right choice. They were about to resurrect 2 million dead humans as beings of cosmic power. There was no way to predict how they would react to their transformation or what they might do with their new abilities. But as the Zephyrian fleet approached Earth for the final assault, he realized they had no choice. Conventional warfare had failed. Diplomacy was impossible. The Phoenix Protocol was humanity's only hope for survival. "The quantum matrices are fully charged," Amy reported. "All consciousness patterns are stable and ready for resurrection." "Energy tap to Earth's core is online," Steve added. "We're drawing enough power to light a continent." Clark placed his hand on the activation control. In a few moments, he would bring back every human who had died in the war. They would return as beings of pure energy, capable of reshaping the universe itself. The galaxy would learn that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. "Madam President, we're ready to activate the Phoenix Protocol," he said. Carter nodded grimly. "Do it, Doctor. Bring our people home." The moment Dr. Clark pressed the activation key, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Deep beneath New Geneva, the quantum storage matrices began to glow with an inner light that had never been seen before. The crystalline structures hummed with power as 2 million consciousness patterns stirred to life. Colonel Danny Martinez had been dead for 18 months. The last thing he remembered was the Zephyrian plasma cannon tearing through his chest during the battle for Luna Base. He had died cursing the aliens who murdered his squad, his rage burning even as his life faded away. Now, something impossible was happening. Danny felt himself awakening, but not in the way he expected. There was no hospital bed, no medical equipment. Instead, he found himself floating in a space that existed between reality and dreams. His body felt different, lighter yet somehow more substantial than before. He looked down at his hands and gasped. Instead of flesh and bone, he saw patterns of pure energy, swirling galaxies of light that responded to his thoughts. When he concentrated, his hands became solid. When he relaxed, they returned to their energy state. "What the hell?" he whispered, and his voice echoed across dimensions. Around him, other figures were materializing. He recognized some of them, soldiers who had died beside him in various battles. Lieutenant Kelly Thompson appeared first, her form crackling with electricity. General Tony Blake took shape nearby, his energy body radiating authority even in death. "Danny, is that you?" Kelly's voice sounded like music and thunder combined. "I think so," Danny replied, still staring at his transformed hands. "But something's changed. I feel different. Stronger." More figures appeared as the Phoenix Protocol continued its work. Major Kate Lewis materialized with stars flowing through her translucent form. Captain Ryan Davis emerged from swirling clouds of cosmic dust. Commander Susan Wright's energy body pulsed with the rhythm of distant pulsars. They were the dead of humanity's war, but death had not diminished them. Instead, it had transformed them into something magnificent and terrible. They were no longer bound by the limitations of flesh. They were beings of pure will and energy, connected to the fundamental forces that shaped the universe. General Blake was the first to understand what had happened. His military mind quickly grasped the strategic implications of their transformation. "Phoenix. Protocol," he said, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic authority. "They actually did it. They brought us back." "Back as what?" Kelly asked, testing her new form by willing herself to float higher in the strange space they occupied. "As weapons," Danny realized, feeling power flowing through his energy body like molten fire. "They made us into living weapons. The transformation was not limited to soldiers. Civilian casualties from the war were awakening as well. Teachers, doctors, children, all reborn as entities of dark energy. But they retained their human memories, their human emotions, and their very human anger at what had been done to them. Dr. Margaret Chen had been a pediatrician in New Tokyo when the Zephyrians attacked. She had died trying to protect children in a hospital that was bombed without warning. Now she awakened as a being capable of manipulating the quantum forces that held atoms together. "My children," she whispered, remembering the young patients she had failed to save. "They killed my children." Her energy form pulsed with maternal fury, and nearby asteroids began to orbit around her like a miniature solar system. The universe itself seemed to respond to her grief. Artist Robert Kim had died in the destruction of San Francisco. He had been painting a mural of Earth's beauty when the alien bombs fell. Now he found he could paint with light itself, creating images that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "I can see everything," he said in wonder. "The whole galaxy is like a canvas waiting to be reshaped." Engineer Carl Brown had been killed defending a power plant in Mumbai. His technical mind quickly adapted to his new capabilities, understanding intuitively how to manipulate energy and matter on a subatomic level. "We're not just alive again," he announced to the others. "We're something new, something the galaxy has never seen before." As more consciousness patterns activated, a network formed between them. They could communicate across vast distances instantly, sharing thoughts and emotions through quantum entanglement. They were individuals, but also part of something greater. The children were perhaps the most remarkable of all. Young Tommy Wilson had been only 8 when he died in the destruction of Chicago. Now he existed as a being of pure curiosity and wonder, his child's imagination given cosmic power. "I can make anything," he said with delight, creating miniature stars that danced around his energy form. "I can fix everything the bad aliens broke." Sarah Kim, age 12, had died protecting her younger brother during the attack on Seoul. Her protective instincts had been amplified by her transformation, giving her the ability to create impenetrable energy shields that could protect entire planets. "Nobody hurts families anymore," she declared, her young voice carrying the authority of a cosmic force. But it was the soldiers who would lead humanity's response. They had died in battle, and they carried the accumulated rage of a species pushed beyond endurance. General Blake felt the weight of command settling on his energy shoulders as he looked at the assembled army of the dead. "We have work to do," he announced, his voice reaching every consciousness in the quantum space. "The Zephyrians are still out there. They're still attacking Earth. They still think humans are weak." Colonel Martinez clenched his energy fists, feeling power that could crack planets flowing through his transformed body. "Then let's show them how wrong they are." Lieutenant Thompson tested her new abilities, finding she could manipulate space-time itself, folding distances and accelerating her movement beyond the speed of light. "I can reach their fleet in seconds, all of their fleets." The awakened dead of humanity began to stir with purpose. They had been given a second chance at life, and with it came abilities that defied every law of physics the galaxy thought it understood. They were no longer the victims of an alien invasion. They were humanity's final answer to those who would destroy Earth. In the deep space around Earth's solar system, Zephyrian sensors began detecting energy readings that made no sense. Unknown power sources were materializing throughout the galaxy, moving at impossible speeds. War Commander Thex studied the reports with growing concern. "What are those energy signatures?" he demanded. His science officer checked and rechecked the readings. "Unknown, Commander. They appear to be artificial, but the power levels are beyond anything in our databases." High above Earth, Admiral Morrison received a transmission that changed everything. The voice that spoke to him was familiar, but it carried an authority that made his bones tremble. "Admiral, this is General Blake. We're back, and we're ready to finish this war." The first strike came without warning. One moment, War Commander Thex was studying the mysterious energy readings on his displays. The next, his flagship was being torn apart by forces that should not have existed. Colonel Danny Martinez materialized directly on the bridge of the Zephyrian command ship. His energy form burned like a miniature star, casting impossible shadows in every direction. The alien crew froze in terror as this being of pure light and fury stepped toward their commander. "Remember me?" Danny asked, his voice carrying the weight of stellar winds. "Luna Base, you killed my entire squad with that plasma cannon." Thex reached for his weapon, but Danny moved faster than thought itself. The human's energy hand passed through the alien's chest, disrupting every molecule in its path. Thex collapsed, his body simply ceasing to function as his atomic structure unraveled. "That was for Sergeant Wilson," Danny said to the corpse. Across the Zephyrian fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Lieutenant Kelly Thompson appeared inside the engine core of a heavy cruiser. With a thought, she reversed the flow of time around the reactor, causing it to experience its own construction in reverse. The massive ship folded in on itself like origami being undone. General Tony Blake chose a more direct approach. He manifested outside the fleet's command station and simply began pulling it apart with his bare hands. The alien metal, designed to withstand the pressure of neutron stars, crumpled like paper before his cosmic strength. "This is for every human child you murdered," Blake growled as he crushed the station's central core between his palms. The Zephyrians tried to fight back, but their weapons passed through the energy beings harmlessly. Plasma cannons, particle beams, even gravity weapons had no effect on targets that existed partially outside normal reality. The humans, meanwhile, could affect the physical world with devastating precision. Commander Susan Wright appeared in the middle of a squadron of Zephyrian fighters. She spread her arms wide and released a pulse of pure entropy. The enemy ships aged millions of years in seconds, their hulls rusting and cracking before exploding into cosmic dust. Major Kate Lewis took a different approach. She located the fleet's ammunition depot and began manipulating the quantum bonds that held the explosive materials together. The resulting detonation could be seen from 3 star systems away. Captain Ryan Davis found the ship carrying Zephyrian ground troops destined for Earth's surface. Instead of destroying it quickly, he chose to make an example. He phase-shifted the entire vessel into a parallel dimension, trapping the aliens in a space where time moved backward and gravity pointed in all directions at once. The Zephyrian fleet, which had seemed invincible just minutes before, was being systematically annihilated by forces they could not understand or fight. Their advanced technology was useless against enemies who could rewrite the laws of physics through pure will, but the awakened humans were not content with defending Earth alone. 3 years of watching their planet burn had filled them with a rage that transcended death itself. They began hunting down Zephyrian forces throughout the galaxy. Dr. Margaret Chen, the pediatrician who had died protecting children, tracked down the alien fleet that had destroyed the colony on New Hope. She found them in deep space, confident in their victory. They had killed 30,000 human colonists, including 5,000 children under the age of 10. Margaret materialized in the center of their formation, her energy form pulsing with maternal fury. She reached out with her consciousness and touched every Zephyrian mind simultaneously, forcing them to experience the terror and pain of every child they had murdered. The aliens screamed as their minds shattered under the weight of their victims' suffering. Margaret then began unmaking their ships atom by atom, speaking the name of each dead child as another vessel ceased to exist. Engineer Carl Brown located the Zephyrian shipyards in the Outer Rim. These massive installations had been producing the vessels used to attack human colonies. Carl studied their construction for exactly 3 seconds before understanding how to unmake them. He didn't destroy the shipyards. Instead, he convinced their matter that it had never been assembled in the first place. Trillion credit facilities simply stopped existing, leaving empty space where moments before there had been the industrial heart of an empire. Young Tommy Wilson, the 8-year-old who had died in Chicago, found a Zephyrian world where the aliens were celebrating their victory over humanity. The child's energy form descended from the sky like a falling star, his innocent voice carrying across the planet's surface. "You hurt my mommy and daddy," he said, his words causing mountains to tremble. "That makes me very sad." The planet's gravity reversed itself in response to Tommy's emotions. Cities that had stood for millennia suddenly found themselves falling toward the sky. The Zephyrians, who had celebrated human suffering, experienced terror beyond their understanding as their entire world turned upside down. 12-year-old Sarah Kim discovered a Zephyrian military academy where young aliens were being trained to kill humans. Her protective instincts, amplified by cosmic power, created an energy field around the planet that prevented any violence from occurring. The alien cadets found themselves physically incapable of harming any living thing. "Fighting is mean," Sarah announced to the confused instructors. "Everyone needs to be nice or they get a timeout." The timeout involved being frozen in temporal stasis for exactly 1,000 years. Artist Robert Kim found the Zephyrian capital world, home to 50 billion aliens who had cheered their species' conquest of humanity. Robert decided they needed to see the beauty they had tried to destroy. He painted images of Earth across their sky, showing them children playing in fields that the Zephyrians had turned to ash. Then he made the images real. Every Zephyrian on the planet suddenly found themselves experiencing the memories of the humans they had killed. They felt the love of families torn apart, the dreams of artists whose hands were stilled, the hopes of children who would never grow up. The psychological impact was devastating. Entire cities fell silent as their populations collapsed under the weight of human grief and love. The Zephyrians had never experienced emotions so pure and powerful. Their cold, calculating minds simply could not process the depth of human feeling. Within 6 hours of the Phoenix Protocol's activation, the mighty Zephyrian collective was in full retreat. Their fleets scattered to the edge of the galaxy, their leadership in chaos, their population traumatized by contact with resurrected human consciousness. But General Blake was not satisfied with mere victory. He gathered the awakened dead around Earth's moon, their energy forms creating a constellation of power that could be seen across the solar system. "This isn't over," he announced to his cosmic army. "The Zephyrians started this war, but there were others who watched Earth burn and did nothing. The galaxy needs to learn what happens when humanity is pushed too far." Colonel Martinez nodded grimly. "Time to send the same message to every species that stood by while we died." Lieutenant Thompson tested her space-time manipulation abilities, folding distances until she could see across the entire galaxy. "I can reach the Corvan Republic in minutes. They refused to help when we asked." The awakened humans turned their attention outward, beyond the fleeing Zephyrians, to the civilizations that had watched humanity's suffering with indifference. The galaxy had chosen to ignore Earth's pleas for help. Now, they would learn the cost of that choice. The news of the Zephyrian collective's destruction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In the crystal towers of the Corvan Republic, elegant aliens who had dismissed humanity as primitive now huddled in emergency meetings. The Stellar Confederacy's ruling council abandoned their luxurious chambers for underground bunkers. Even the ancient elders of the core worlds, beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, felt fear for the first time in millennia. Ambassador Frank Miller stood before the Galactic Council, one of the few living humans left to speak for his species. The massive chamber, which had once buzzed with the voices of representatives from 200 worlds, was now eerily quiet. Half the seats were empty as various species had fled to their home systems in panic. Frank looked tired. He was 63 years old and had spent the last 3 years watching the galaxy ignore Earth's pleas for help. Now, with his transformed countrymen spreading terror across the stars, he had become humanity's voice to a universe that had finally learned to listen. "Honored delegates," Frank began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. 3 years ago, I stood in this same spot and begged for your help. I showed you images of burning cities and dying children. I explained that the Zephyrians were committing genocide against my species. The Corvan representative, a tall being with skin like polished silver, shifted nervously in his seat. He remembered that day clearly. The Corvan Republic had voted against providing aid to Earth, claiming it would be too expensive and politically complicated. "You told me that humanity's problems were not your concern," Frank continued. "You said that a young species like ours should learn to defend itself. The Stellar Confederacy representative actually laughed when I requested military assistance. That representative was no longer present. Captain Ryan Davis had paid him a personal visit the day before. The man was now trapped in a temporal loop, experiencing the moment of his cruel laughter for eternity. Now the Zephyrian collective no longer exists," Frank said calmly. "Their empire, built over 1,000 years, was unmade in a single day. Their homeworld is a frozen wasteland where time moves backward. Their fleets drift through space as cosmic dust." The chamber fell completely silent. Every being present had seen the reports. Entire star systems had gone dark. Zephyrian colonies that had existed for centuries had simply vanished from the galactic map. The speed and totality of their destruction defied comprehension. "My people are no longer the victims you ignored," Frank continued. "They have become something beyond your understanding. Death has not diminished them. It has transformed them into forces of nature. They are anger given cosmic form, and they remember everyone who turned away when Earth was burning." High Chancellor Vex of the Corvan Republic rose from his seat, his voice trembling despite his attempt at authority. "Ambassador Miller, surely your people can be reasoned with. The Corvan Republic regrets any misunderstanding regarding Earth's situation. We are prepared to offer full diplomatic recognition and substantial aid." Frank smiled sadly. 3 years too late, Chancellor. Your offer would have meant everything to us then. Now it's meaningless. You see, the dead don't negotiate. They don't forgive. They only remember. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's lights began to flicker. Energy readings spiked across every sensor in the building. Then, impossible figures began materializing throughout the room. General Tony Blake appeared first, his energy form towering over the terrified delegates. His presence made the artificial gravity fluctuate wildly, causing several aliens to float helplessly in the air. "Chancellor Vex," Blake said, his voice carrying the authority of cosmic forces. "I remember your speech about the unfortunate but necessary destruction of primitive species. Do you remember mine?" The Corvan leader tried to speak, but found his voice had abandoned him. Around the chamber, other awakened humans were manifesting. Colonel Danny Martinez materialized beside the Stellar Confederacy's emergency representative. Lieutenant Kelly Thompson appeared directly above the hegemony's delegation, her form crackling with temporal energy. "We asked for ships," Danny said, his words causing the metal walls to vibrate. "You gave us silence. We asked for weapons. You gave us empty promises. We asked for sanctuary for our children. You gave us closed borders." Dr. Margaret Chen manifested near the section where the neutral world sat. Her maternal fury made the air itself heavy with grief and rage. "Do you know how many children died while you debated?" she asked. "While you worried about political complications and trade agreements? 7,300,012. I remember each name." The aliens in the chamber began to experience something they had never felt before. Human emotion, raw and unfiltered, began flowing from the energy beings. They felt the desperation of parents watching their children die. They experienced the agony of soldiers fighting hopeless battles. They shared the grief of an entire species facing extinction. Many of the delegates collapsed under the psychic weight. Their minds, evolved in different environments with different emotional structures, simply could not process the intensity of human feeling. Artist Robert Kim appeared in the center of the chamber, his form painting images in the air with pure light. He showed them Earth as it had been before the war. Blue oceans, green forests, cities full of laughter and music. Then he showed them Earth as the aliens had left it, a scarred ball of rock orbiting a dying sun. "This is what your neutrality cost," Robert said. "This is the price of your indifference." Young Tommy Wilson materialized near the viewing gallery where journalists from across the galaxy watched in terror. The 8-year-old's cosmic power made reality itself seem fragile and temporary. "You were all very mean to my people," Tommy said with the innocent directness of a child. "When someone is mean, they get punished. That's the rule." Ambassador Frank stepped forward, still playing his role as humanity's diplomatic voice, even as cosmic beings of incredible power surrounded him. "The awakened dead have given me a message for each of your civilizations," he announced. "They want you to understand that what happened to the Zephyrians was not revenge, it was justice. And justice, once awakened, does not return to sleep." "Chancellor." Vex found his voice at last. "What do you want from us? Reparations? Territory? We can negotiate terms." General Blake laughed, a sound like stellar winds across empty space. "Chancellor, you still don't understand. We don't want anything from you. We want something much simpler." "Which is?" "We want you to be afraid," Blake said simply. "For 3 years, we were afraid. We watched our children die while you counted. Your prophets. We begged for help while you calculated political risks. Now it's your turn to know fear." Dr. Chen stepped closer to the Corvan delegation. "Every night you will go to sleep wondering if tomorrow is the day we decide your civilization has served its purpose. Every morning, you will wake up grateful that we allowed you to see another sunrise." Lieutenant Thompson manipulated time around the chamber, giving every being present a glimpse of their possible futures. They saw their worlds empty and silent, their suns extinguished, their species erased from history with the casual ease of a thought. The galaxy wanted to see what humanity was capable of when pushed to our limits, Colonel Martinez said. Congratulations, you got your wish. Frank looked around the chamber one last time. The age of humanity hiding our true nature is over. We tried to join your galactic community as equals. You rejected us. So we'll do something different instead. What? Whispered the representative from the outer colonies. Frank's smile was cold as the void between stars. We'll rule it. The awakened humans began to fade from the chamber, their message delivered. But their presence lingered in the minds of every delegate present. The galaxy had learned a new truth about the universe. There were fates worse than death, and humanity had just become the arbiters of those fates. As the emergency session dissolved into chaos, Frank Miller walked calmly to his shuttle. His work as an ambassador was done. From now on, humanity would speak through actions rather than words. The awakened humans did not wait for the galaxy to make the first move. Within days of their declaration to the Galactic Council, they began systematically dismantling every civilization that had ignored Earth's suffering. Their approach was methodical, terrifying in its precision and scope. Captain Ryan Davis materialized above the capital world of the Corvan Republic. The planet below sparkled with crystal cities that had stood for 10,000 years, monuments to a civilization that prided itself on art, philosophy, and calculated neutrality. Ryan remembered how their representatives had called Earth's destruction regrettable but inevitable. He descended through the atmosphere like a falling star, his energy form leaving trails of disrupted reality in its wake. The Corvan defense systems activated automatically, launching everything from plasma missiles to gravity bombs. All of them passed harmlessly through his transformed body. Ryan landed in the center of the capital's main plaza, where millions of Corvans had gathered to witness his arrival. The silver-skinned aliens stood frozen in fear, their large eyes reflecting the terrible light of his presence. "People of Corva," Ryan announced, his voice carrying across the planet's surface. 3 years ago, your government decided that human lives were worth less than your political convenience. Today, you learn the cost of that decision. He raised his hand, and the planet's gravity began to fluctuate. Buildings that had weathered millennia started to crack and shift. The Corvan's precious crystal spires, symbols of their advanced civilization, began singing as stress fractures spread through their structures. But Ryan was not there to destroy quickly. The dead of humanity wanted the galaxy to understand that their vengeance would be measured and complete. "Your species values art above all else," Ryan continued. "So I will show you the greatest artwork ever created, the transformation of matter into pure aesthetics." He began rewriting the quantum structure of the planet itself. The crystal cities slowly began changing, their geometric precision giving way to organic curves that told the story of humanity's suffering. Every building became a monument to human pain, every street a pathway through the memories of dying children. The Corvans watched in horror as their world was reshaped into a living memorial to the species they had abandoned. Their technology still functioned, their people still lived, but their planet had become an eternal reminder of their moral failure. Major Kate Lewis took a different approach with the hegemony worlds. This coalition of military species had refused to help Earth because they viewed humans as strategically insignificant. Kate decided to show them what strategic significance really meant. She appeared simultaneously on a dozen hegemony military bases, her energy forms standing in their most secure command centers. The alien generals and admirals who had dismissed humanity's pleas now faced a being who could unmake their strongest fortifications with a thought. "You pride yourselves on military precision," Kate said to the assembled commanders. "Let me demonstrate what real warfare looks like." She didn't attack their bases. Instead, she began teaching their soldiers about human military history. Every hegemony warrior suddenly found themselves experiencing the memories of human soldiers throughout history. They felt the determination of troops at Valley Forge, the courage of fighters in World War II, the sacrifice of peacekeepers in distant conflicts. The alien soldiers, conditioned for cold efficiency, were overwhelmed by the emotional intensity of human military tradition. They learned that humans didn't fight just for territory or resources, but for principles, for each other, for the idea that some things were worth dying for. Within hours, half the hegemony military had suffered complete psychological breakdowns. The other half had deserted their posts, unable to reconcile their old understanding of warfare with the passionate commitment they had witnessed in human memory. Commander Susan Wright focused on the trade federations that had profited from Earth's destruction. The Merchant Alliance had actually increased prices on medical supplies and refugee transport when humanity needed help most. Susan found their primary trade hub and decided to give them a lesson in economics. She materialized in the center of the massive space station where trillions of credits changed hands every hour. The alien traders, motivated purely by profit, had never encountered anything like the fury of the human dead. "You turned our suffering into opportunity," Susan said, her voice causing the station's metal framework to resonate like a bell. "You sold weapons to our enemies and charged our refugees double rates for safe passage." Susan began manipulating the fundamental forces that governed trade and commerce. Every transaction that had profited from human misery was reversed. Credits that had been earned through exploitation simply ceased to exist. Ships purchased with blood money forgot how to achieve faster-than-light travel. But more than that, she cursed the traders with the ability to feel the emotional weight of every transaction. Suddenly, beings who had lived for pure profit found themselves experiencing the desperation of the refugees they had overcharged, the grief of the families they had separated, the anger of the soldiers they had refused to arm. The trade station descended into chaos as merchants who had never felt guilt in their lives were overwhelmed by the accumulated suffering their greed had caused. Dr. Margaret Chen visited the worlds where human refugees had been turned away. The peaceful species who claimed they couldn't get involved learned what involvement really meant when she arrived to collect the debt they owed to humanity's children. She manifested in their schools and hospitals, her maternal energy filling every space where young beings learned and grew. The alien children found themselves sharing dreams with human children who had died in the war. They played games with the ghosts of kids from Earth, learned songs from vanished human cultures, and cried for friends they had never met, but somehow remembered. The adult aliens watched in growing horror as their own children began speaking human languages, drawing pictures of Earth, and asking why their parents hadn't helped when the human kids were dying. The psychological impact on their species was devastating, as an entire generation grew up carrying the memories of humanity's lost children. Engineer Carl Brown targeted the technological civilizations that had refused to share defensive technology with Earth. The Advanced Research Collective had claimed that humans were too primitive to handle sophisticated weapon systems. Carl decided to show them what primitive really meant. He visited their most advanced research facilities and began introducing chaos into their technological systems. Not destruction, but something worse: unreliability. Their quantum computers started producing random errors. Their fusion reactors developed mysterious fluctuations. Their faster-than-light communications began transmitting the final messages of dying humans instead of scientific data. The researchers found themselves trapped in facilities where the technology they trusted had become unpredictable and hostile. Every system they had spent lifetimes perfecting now carried the vengeful spirit of human innovation. Artist Robert Kim painted humanity's story across the skies of 100 worlds. His cosmic murals showed the galaxy what they had really lost when Earth burned. Not just another primitive species, but the creators of music that could make stars weep, art that could capture the essence of hope itself, literature that explored the deepest questions of existence. The aliens who had dismissed human culture as crude and simplistic found themselves weeping at the beauty of what they had allowed to be destroyed. Robert's paintings didn't just show them human art. They made them feel it, understand it, grieve for its loss with the intensity of the artists who had created it. Young Tommy Wilson and Sarah Kim focused on the species that had children of their own, but had still refused to help Earth's families. The two cosmic children appeared in nurseries and schools across the galaxy, their innocent voices carrying terrible authority. "You have little ones, too," Sarah said to the terrified alien parents. "But you didn't care when our little ones were scared and crying." The alien children began experiencing nightmares where they were chased by monsters that looked like Zephyrian soldiers. They woke up screaming for parents who suddenly understood the terror that human families had faced every night for 3 years. But perhaps the most effective punishment was administered by General Tony Blake himself. He appeared before the leaders of every major civilization simultaneously, his presence filling their throne rooms, council chambers, and private offices. "You wanted to see what humanity would become when pushed to our limits," Blake announced to the terrified rulers. "You got your wish. We have become your judgment. We are the consequence of your choices. And we are going to rule this galaxy not because we want to, but because you have proven that you cannot be trusted with power over life and death." The galaxy that had once dismissed humanity as insignificant now trembled before the cosmic forces they had helped create. In their fear, they began to understand that the real horror was not that humanity had become so powerful. The real horror was that humanity was right. 1 year after the awakening of humanity's dead, the galaxy had been reshaped entirely. Where once there had been hundreds of independent civilizations, now there was only the human dominion. The transformation had been swift and absolute, carried out not through conquest, but through the simple reality that no species could resist beings who controlled the fundamental forces of the universe. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers. The vast space had been transformed into the throne room of humanity's new empire. Where alien delegates had once debated, now representatives from surviving civilizations came to receive their orders. The irony was not lost on Jake. Humanity had begged for a voice in galactic affairs. Now they were the only voice that mattered. Jake himself had undergone his own transformation, though not through death like his cosmic colleagues. The Phoenix Protocol had been expanded to include living humans, allowing them to exist simultaneously as physical beings and energy entities. He was Emperor Jake Morrison now, ruler of a galactic empire that spanned 200 formerly independent Worlds. Your Majesty, said Ambassador Frank Miller, approaching the crystal throne that hovered in the center of the chamber. Frank had remained fully human by choice, serving as a bridge between the transformed and the living. The last of the resistance movements have surrendered. The Outer Rim Coalition has formally requested admission to the Dominion. Jake nodded, his attention focused on the massive holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Every star system was marked with human oversight. Every trade route was monitored by the awakened dead. Every communication was filtered through consciousness networks that could detect hostile thoughts before they became hostile actions. How are the children adapting? Jake asked. This was always his primary concern. The living human children who had survived the war were growing up in a galaxy that bent to their slightest whim. Young humans found that alien adults would literally reshape reality to avoid causing them even minor discomfort. The psychological effects were concerning. Better than expected, Frank replied. Dr. Clark's educational programs seem to be working. The children understand that their power comes with responsibility. Nathan Clark had survived the war as well, choosing to remain in physical form to study the long-term effects of the Phoenix Protocol. His research facilities on the rebuilt Earth were now the galaxy's premier centers for consciousness studies and quantum psychology. Through the chamber's vast windows, Jake could see Earth itself. The planet had been restored to its former beauty, and beyond. The awakened dead had used their cosmic abilities to repair every scar left by the Zephyrian assault. Forests grew more lush-fully than before. Oceans sparkled with impossible blues. Cities rose in graceful spirals that seemed to defy gravity. But Earth was no longer just a planet. It was the capital of an empire built on the graves of humanity's enemies and the fear of humanity's subjects. Sir, Frank continued, there's been a development with the Corvin situation. Jake's expression darkened. The Corvin Republic had been among the first to learn the cost of ignoring human suffering. Their crystal cities had been transformed into monuments of shame. Their entire civilization turned into a living memorial to their moral failure. What kind of development? They're asking permission to die. Jake was quiet for a long moment. This was not the first time a conquered species had made such a request. The psychological weight of living under humanity's absolute dominion had proven too much for some aliens to bear. They existed in a universe where their former oppressors could unmake them with a thought, where their children played with the ghosts of human kids, where their greatest achievements had been casually reshaped to serve as reminders of their guilt. Denied, Jake said finally. They chose to live when humans were dying. Now they live with the consequences of that choice. The decision was harsh, but Jake had learned that mercy was a luxury he could no longer afford. The galaxy had to understand that actions had permanent consequences. The species that had watched Earth burn would spend the rest of their existence remembering why that had been a mistake. General Tony Blake materialized beside the throne, his energy form flickering between dimensions. Even in his cosmic state, Blake maintained his military bearing and his loyalty to the chain of command. Emperor, we've received communications from beyond the Galactic Rim, Blake reported. Long-range sensors indicate that news of our transformation has reached civilizations in other galaxies. Some are sending diplomatic missions. Others appear to be fleeing. Jake considered this information carefully. The awakened humans had consolidated control over their home galaxy in less than a year, but the universe was vast. There were other galaxies, other civilizations, other potential threats to humanity's security. What's our response capability? He asked. The awakened can travel. Between galaxies in a matter of days, Blake replied. If necessary, we can extend the dominion beyond our current borders. Not yet, Jake decided. Let the other galaxies come to us. If they approach peacefully, we'll welcome them as subjects. If they come as threats... He left the sentence unfinished. The fate of the Zephyrians served as a sufficient example. Dr. Margaret Chen appeared in the chamber, her maternal energy now focused on protecting not just human children, but all young beings in the galaxy. Her transformation had made her something like a cosmic mother figure, ensuring that no child anywhere would ever experience the terror that human families had faced during the war. The new generation is showing interesting developments, she reported. Human children born after the transformation seem to naturally possess minor reality manipulation abilities. They're not as powerful as the awakened, but they're certainly not ordinary humans either. This was both encouraging and concerning. Humanity was evolving beyond what they had been before the war, but the long-term implications were unknown. Jake made a mental note to have Dr. Clark expand his research into the phenomenon. Lieutenant Kelly Thompson materialized near the throne, her form crackling with temporal energy. She had become humanity's primary scout, using her time manipulation abilities to explore possible futures and warn of potential threats. Emperor, I've been observing the probability streams, she reported. There's something you need to know about our future. What kind of something? In approximately 50 years, assuming current trends continue, humanity will face a choice. We'll have become so powerful that we could reshape the entire universe according to our will. But doing so would require us to abandon the last of our human nature and become something entirely alien ourselves. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cosmic energies flowing around him. What's the alternative? We maintain our humanity but accept that there will always be threats we can't control, forces in the universe that could challenge us. We would remain powerful, but not omnipotent. It was the ultimate question that Jake had been avoiding. How much humanity should they sacrifice in the name of human survival? They had already crossed lines that would have horrified the species they once were. How much further would they go? Young Tommy Wilson appeared in the chamber, his 8-year-old form containing the power to unmake stars. Despite his cosmic abilities, he was still fundamentally a child, curious and innocent even after everything he had experienced. Emperor Jake, Tommy said with the directness of youth, why do the aliens always look so sad when they see us? Jake knelt down to the boy's level, though the gesture was largely symbolic since they could all exist at any size they chose. Because they're afraid, Tommy. They're afraid because they hurt us and they know we remember. But we fixed everything, didn't we? We made the bad aliens go away and made everyone be nice to each other. Yes, we did. Then why are they still scared? Jake struggled to explain the concept to a child who could reshape reality with his imagination. Sometimes, Tommy, when people do something very bad, they feel guilty about it forever. Even if they're sorry, even if they try to make it better, they still remember what they did wrong. Tommy considered this with the seriousness that only children could bring to cosmic questions. So they're sad because they know they were mean to us? That's right. Good, Tommy said with innocent satisfaction. Being mean should make you sad. As the cosmic child disappeared to play among the stars, Jake realized that Tommy had summarized the new reality perfectly. The galaxy was sad because it had been mean to humanity. That sadness was the foundation of the human dominion, the source of its power, and the guarantee of its permanence. Jake stood and walked to the chamber's great window, looking out at the restored Earth and the transformed galaxy beyond. They had achieved something that no species in galactic history had managed: absolute victory over their enemies and absolute security for their people. But as he watched human children playing in gardens that grew according to their whims, as he observed alien delegations arriving to pay homage to their human overlords, as he felt the pulse of cosmic power that flowed through every awakened consciousness, Jake wondered if they had won too completely. Humanity had tried peace and been met with war. They had offered friendship and received indifference. They had begged for mercy and been shown cruelty. In response, they had become something magnificent and terrible, beings of infinite,